Many people see art as falling into one of three categories. It's either drawing, it's either painting, or it's sculpting. And many people disqualify themselves on the basis of not being able to do that particular thing. What I'm saying is there are an infinite number of different ways that you could do each of those individual things. The point is that I believed for a really long time that I couldn't paint because I was not excellent at blending colors, mixing colors. In fact, I was using this horrible, cheap, really low quality craft paint that I'm pretty sure was off most of the time. But I didn't believe that what I was doing counted as painting because I didn't believe that I had the skills that most professional painters value. If you go onto YouTube and watch some prominent artist, it can actually be a little bit depressing to watch them work because you know that you can't do that. Even if it doesn't qualify for the classical painting niche. And I'm going to talk through about my attitude towards painting in this little video as we recreate one of my favorite paintings. And to show you that there's nothing fancy about my materials, I am using garden variety craft paint and it's off. You can see by that lumpy consistency that this is not a high quality paint. But mixing it with a little bit of water, I decided to apply it to my canvas. What you see here now is nothing more than a little paint by numbers exercise. I obviously decided beforehand what Mr. Fox would look like in terms of what lines went where, but the colors I'm using here are pretty much just random. I decided to try and separate the colors that I had by dotting them here and there, making sure that the light and the dark were separated. At this point you'll see that this is not a professional looking painting. I've barely stayed within the lines. My paint colors are weak and translucent. They are not very strong. I haven't bothered going back and making them look a little bit more solid. On the whole, at the moment, it's looking more like a children's painting. But we're not done. The techniques and rules that artists live by are not what make their art excellent. It's their ability to use what's at their disposal to overcome their weaknesses. So for me, I don't have the patience to carefully go over every area perfectly and within the lines again and again. And I won't let that define me as a painter. So I grabbed my paint markers and I used my slightly steadier hand for some drawing work. You may think, how can he have the patience for these ridiculous marker lines but not for a paintbrush? Well, simply put, this is where I'm at in my skill level. Maybe one day I'll realize I was using rubbish paint. Maybe I'll find something that's worth being painstaking over. But for now, this works for me. You'll see even my marker work isn't perfect. You can see some lines are not as solid as they could be, but that's okay. I'm more than happy to come back at a later stage and go over those lines again. Now that I've got great markers of shapes, I also use this opportunity to go over some of the panels that need a little bit more opacity. Now, don't think that I'm doing any expert color matching here. I'm just mixing colors for the sake of having different colors. So if I mix it and it's different, it goes on the canvas. If I tried to mix the same color twice, it probably wouldn't work. Point of this is to have varying color panels, not for the panels to be any particular color. What I did find worked quite nicely was adding a slightly lighter or darker version of a color within the panel to make it look a little more interesting. I'm sure you're wondering why amid all these oranges and browns, I went with dark green for the inner ear. Well, it's because I wanted to. Nobody's going to tell me that I can't have a fox with a green ear. And if they tried, I'd simply say they didn't get it. Remember earlier I mentioned that good art isn't necessarily in your technique? but in the tools and resources you use to overcome your weaknesses? Well, yes, at that time I was talking about mile markers to overcome my impatience. But it also extends to digital tools. When I wasn't quite sure what kind of a background I wanted to use for all of this negative space, I took a photo and dropped it into Photoshop. After playing around with a couple of background options, I decided to go with a plain grey background to start with, and just sort of see what happens a little later on. Sometimes knowing exactly what is going to happen is great for art, but in my experience, I do my best work when I've only got a sort of loose plan. It makes space for creativity to burst through spontaneously. I'm sure you've noticed that with many parts of this video, I keep going back to an area rather than finishing it off in one go. That's partly to do with allowing that area to dry, but it's also partly to do with having a very loose plan for my piece. Here's a little more of that, because I felt like it in the moment. I'm just lucky when these moments turn out looking good, because trust me, they don't always look good. And again, since I've painted over a lot of these lines, they won't look great without a touch-up. Once I've done a thorough touch-up, I can... My pen leaked, which unfortunately meant that my sleeve got soaked with black ink, and my sleeve happened to do some painting without me knowing. But that's okay. In my 10 years of being an artist, I've made a lot of mistakes. Taking them in your stride is the only way to make sure they don't crush you or demotivate you. Now this is the part you've been waiting for, and it's also my favorite part of the piece. The icing on the cake. The details. I believe that these alternating, intersecting lines are what give this piece its personality. Absolutely zero of these lines were pre-planned. The only goal was to alternate the frequency and the thickness of the lines between panels so that they stand out and don't repeat. So I put on some good old-fashioned lo-fi beats and got stuck in. You might be surprised, but this part only took me about 20 minutes in total. Doing the background was a little scarier than I thought it would be, since it's quite a big open space. I wanted it to have some substance, but not to distract from the fox itself. So I settled for more lines, but with a ruler this time. All that was left to do to finish this off was to add some very simple shadows on the eyes and under the chin with some watered down black paint. I did this just to add a smidgen of depth on an overall flat painting. And there you have it, a simple but somehow complex painting that bypasses a lot of the rules professional painters would have you follow. I hope you enjoyed this video or found it useful to your art journey. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the matter in the comments below. If you'd like to hear more or see more from me, consider subscribing to join the journey of that mad artist.